This is going to be a complicated one, and I don't think people on either side of the argument are gonna want to hear it. But thankfully, I don't really care, so here we go. I've been very conflicted about the idea of all of Fazbear Frights being in the game universe ever since the new Scott interview. I feel like a lot of contradictions between these books and the games are probably due to two reasons. First, Scott had a hands-off approach at the time that these books were being written. They started production in 2018 and seemingly went on until 2021, which is generally the same time period as Security Breach. We know that this led to lots of problems with Security Breach, and we know that apart from the stingers, which Scott seemingly wrote himself, Scott only provided outlines of the stories to his co-authors rather than playing an active part in the full process.
I just get to think up a really scary scenario, and then I create maybe a 10 to 15 page story out of it. And then I have writers that I work with, obviously, and they take that and they really flesh it out and fill it out and add the details and turn it into a full-length story, and I get to kind of just really see it come to life.
And this also lines up with what one of the co-authors said in a direct message to someone. This could lead to major misinterpretations, like Hudson's fiery death being contained in an oven rather than burning the horror attraction to the ground, and Susie never grieving over her dead dog, nor even having a dog as far as the story tells us. And building off of that first reason, Scott wrote the outlines for the Fazbear Frights stories while not knowing the direction Steel Wool was going to push future entries.
I had a very specific story in mind, and it is very different than the one that got in the game. And I think a part of that is the way that I conveyed that to Steel Wool. Because what I was trying to do was I was trying to tell Steel Wool to do specific things throughout the game, put specific items in specific places, have specific characters do certain things, meanwhile not telling them what the story plot was.
This explains stuff like how the Stitch Wraith stingers are somehow both before the Pizzaplex was built and many years after Pizzeria Simulator. At the time Scott wrote the stingers, he probably wasn't aware of the idea for the Pizzeria Simulator location being under the Pizzaplex. And it's possible that the idea didn't even exist yet. There's a build of Security Breach from August 2021 where that part of the map was still being designed. Scott was able to clean up most of the contradictions between his original vision and the lore that Security Breach established, but it's incredibly hard to retroactively steer 33 stories into the direction they were meant to go in. But not necessarily impossible. There are two paths Scott might take at this point. One is that he could try to mend some contradictions using the Megacat games and the interactive novels, like how he used Ruin and VIP to mend a lot of the contradictions between Tales and Security Breach, and hope that we ignore the rest. The other is that he could use Megacat's new spin-off series to rebuild the Frights timeline from the ground up, thus stripping the Frights books from the canon. At this stage, it's impossible to say which route Scott will take, but time will tell. Maybe. Or we could just be in eternal limbo with Scott continuing to mock us over our confusion until he dies of old age. There is a silver lining, though. I can safely say that we won't be running into this issue with future games and books. Scott said in the interview that initially he would let Megacat Studios crawl inside a hole for months on end and do whatever they wanted. But by the time the game released, Megacat said that every detail had to be vetted to make sure it was lore accurate. And both of the interactive novels that are out right now adhere near perfectly to what the games establish. So while this debate is really frustrating and probably has no real answer right now, we shouldn't ever have a repeat of it.